Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the first speaker, Jonghyun, of Group 3. It's such a beautiful day outside today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just like a sunny day after a heavy rain. Maybe you're curious about why. Maybe you're curious about why I said this in the beginning of our presentation, right?
Yeah.
Can you guess why? Yes, it's because today our group will present about comparisons. I think most of you will heard about comparisons when you study things like transitions. Then what's comparison? Comparison is comparing between two or more objects that has similarities or have significant differences. First, our speaker Hyunju will tell you about similes and metaphors. Then, Jaewon will tell you about analogies and contrast. Then, Seongjun will give you some guidelines about it. Now, listen carefully.
Now I will explain similes and metaphors. We use similes and metaphors in daily life and literature. Similes and metaphors are representative of visual language and short comparison. They help people to visualize and refine the abstract concept. It makes people understand the meaning better. Firstly, I will explain the difference between similes and metaphors. Simile is a short comparison between two unlike things by using like or as. For example, we can make sentence like, this shirt is as white as snow. This sentence is emphasizing the word white. It helps audience to understand the image of white better. On the other hand, metaphor is a metaphor compared to like things without using like or as. The sentence like the time is gold is a good example of metaphors. As you see, they use different expression. However, they are still based on resemblance and similarity between two words. So we can make metaphors by removing like or as from the similes, like this. Secondly, then why we use similes and metaphors. First, they make words more vivid. Second, they catch audience's attention by living the ordinary language. Finally, they are more efficient. As Aristotle said, metaphor is the act of giving a name that belongs to something else. That belongs to something else. Therefore, we could give much meaning with few words, but we have to avoid or mixing similes and metaphors awkwardly. They only work effectively when they use in proper situation. Next, Jaewon is going to explain analogy and contrast.
Okay, hello, I'm Jaewon, and from now on, I'll introduce two more things of comparison, analogies and contrast. Firstly, I'll explain the analogy. Comparing the similes and metaphor, analogy is small, long comparison. The outstanding characteristic of analogy is relate similarities between object and situation. Since using situation to compare, of course it can be long. And there are two different types in analogy, literal analogy and figurative analogy. What is different? First, literal analogy is real, but the figurative analogy is invented. And second, literal analogy is compare like things, such as man to man, country to country, and machine to machine. But the figurative analogy compare events and objective that fall into unlikenesses classes by stating a relationship between them. Let me give an example. A teacher wants to lecture to students the importance of controlling their anger. She can say like that. Saying things in anger and you later regret is like driving nails in the fence. You can put the nails out, but the scar remains. The figurative analogy is so corrective so that it can wrap audience's attention and so ingenious that you don't provide hard evidence. Now let's move on to contrast. Contrast is a different form of comparison. It compares differences rather than similarities. And different similarity rather than similarities between two different things. Here is an example, and for saving time, please read it yourself. And directly let's move on to the next speaker, Seongjun. He will give an guides of using comparison. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll give some guidelines in using comparisons. First, you have to use familiar phrases to make it clear to understand. If you don't use the familiar phrases, the audience will not be able to understand the comparison. Second, avoid comparisons. Avoid the tried and sharp words. If overuse phrases like pig and blind, like that would make presentation boring. And third, you have to use comparisons when comparisons are really needed. Although you have very good comparisons, if you overuse it, it will distract the presentation. Fourth, you have to make certain literal comparison between similar items. If you compare two items which has two big gaps or difference, audience will be hardly agree with your point. And lastly, you need to ensure the listeners easily understand the comparison between two objects. If you say something, the audience should follow your speech immediately. But if you use too much hard comparisons, audience will not be able to follow your speech. Now, Jonghyun will introduce about our new topic.
Yeah. Then let's move on to our next topic, testimony. Testimony is just like quotations. Testimony is classified into two. First, expert testimony, and then peer testimony. Our next speaker, Haewon, will tell you about those. And then Seongjun will again tell you about some guidelines about them.
Have you ever claimed about some opinions in front of the other people? If you have, what method do you usually use to make your opinions clear? There is a method to make your opinions clear and credible. It is testimony. Testimony is often used to support the assertion or points that you make. Listeners are interested in two types of testimony. One is the expert testimony, and the other is peer testimony. Expert testimony must satisfy more demanding criteria than peer testimony. If you want to emphasize how important that is, you can call from the expert only group. There are two factors that you should avoid when you use expert testimony. First, is the source of information truly from an expert? Second, is the source trustworthy? So when you use expert testimony, the expert testimony must be both of them, from an expert and trustworthy source. Then peer testimony is quite simple. Explained briefly, it's like the interview of the news with the man on the street. Although it is not strong proof, but the opinions of the others influence us. Then the next speaker, Seongjun, will talk about the guideline for using testimony.
This time I'll talk about guidelines for testimony. First, let's think about the credibility of the source. If the source is not credible, the testimony is useless. And you have to operate short to the point and clear to the audience. In using direct quotation, this can be necessary. If you don't, it will be distract the presentation. Now, join the conclude our presentation.
To sum up, we'll look thoroughly about our topics, comparisons and testimony. Before I end our speech, I want to tell you expert testimony about comparisons. Jerry Wiseman, an author of the book Power Presentation, said, "Comparisons arouse audience's spontaneous sympathy, especially it infuse vividness into abstract and boring topics." I'm sure that you will all be a perfect speaker if you use those things that we mentioned in our speech. Thank you for listening.